The night was eerily still when the first letter arrived, a crisp white envelope taped to the front door of Daniel Mercer's suburban home. At first glance, it looked like a routine notice, another petty reminder from the Homeowners Association, the kind of thing he and his neighbors had grown accustomed to ignoring. But this one was different. Bold red letters screamed across the top, "Violation notice, immediate action required." Daniel's eyes narrowed. According to the letter, his house was against the rules, though it didn't specify exactly how. It was vague, almost threatening, and yet disturbingly confident. He read it again, his pulse quickening. Against the rules? How could a house itself be illegal? Daniel had lived in that cul-de-sac for nearly 10 years. He had followed the guidelines, paid his dues, trimmed his hedges exactly to regulation height, and even repainted his shutters when the board had claimed the old color was an aesthetically cohesive. But this notice wasn't about paint, hedges, or parking spaces. It was about the entire property. For a moment, Daniel considered crumpling it up and throwing it away. But something in the tone, the finality of the words, made him uneasy. It didn't feel like a mistake. It felt deliberate. By the next morning, whispers had already spread through the neighborhood. People gave him odd looks, muttered in hushed tones as he passed, and avoided his gaze. It was as though the letter had been written for their eyes, not his. Daniel felt cornered, yet also strangely determined. He decided to confront the HOA president, Margaret Hensley, a woman known for her razor-sharp smile and iron grip on the community. Margaret didn't just enforce the rules, she was the rules. When Daniel showed her the notice, she barely blinked. "Rules are rules, Mr. Mercer," she said smoothly, sipping her coffee as though his entire life weren't hanging on her words. "Your home has certain discrepancies." When he pressed her for details, she leaned in closer, her voice lowering to a chilling whisper. "Some houses shouldn't be here. Yours is one of them." That sentence haunted him. Houses didn't just not belong. His mind spun with possibilities. Was it about permits, zoning, or was it something deeper, something hidden beneath the manicured lawns and white fences of their seemingly perfect neighborhood? He decided to dig. Days turned into nights as Daniel searched through county records, old maps, and even building permits. That ass when he noticed something strange. His property line didn't quite match up with the rest. His lot had been redrawn years ago, shifted slightly into an area that wasn't technically under HOA jurisdiction, which meant the HOA might not even have authority over his home. But that couldn't be the full story, could it? If that were true, why were they so desperate to push him out? One night, unable to sleep, Daniel walked the perimeter of his yard with a flashlight. As he traced the boundary, the beam caught something unusual, an old, rusted metal stake driven deep into the ground. He dug around it, revealing what looked like a survey marker, decades old, but carved faintly into the metal was something he didn't expect. Property of Hensley Estates. His stomach dropped. The HOA president's family name. This wasn't about rules. It was about ownership. The next morning, another letter appeared. This one far more aggressive. Final warning, vacate the premises or face legal consequences. Daniel's hands trembled as he read it. Why would Margaret and the HOA want his house gone so badly? What were they trying to hide? Rehook. Just when he thought it couldn't get worse, his neighbor, an elderly man named Howard, pulled him aside. His voice shook as he whispered, "You're not the first." They did the same thing to the Garrison family. Daniel frowned. He had never heard of the Garrisons. Howard's eyes darted nervously to Margaret's house. That's because they disappeared. One night, gone. No one talks about it, but we all remember. That revelation shook Daniel to his core. A family erased, their memory scrubbed from the neighborhood like they never existed. Was he next? He tried to call a lawyer, But oddly, every attorney he reached backed out once they learned it was an HOA case in Hensley Estates. It was as if the entire legal system had been warned against him. Then came the night of the blackout. At exactly 10:13 p.m., the power in Daniel's home shut off, plunging the house into darkness. Outside, he heard footsteps, multiple people moving in sync. He grabbed a flashlight and looked through the blinds. Figures stood at the edge of his property, silhouettes watching silently. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they vanished into the night. Re-hook. At this point, Daniel realized it wasn't just about property lines or ownership. It was something far darker. He dug deeper into public archives and stumbled upon a lawsuit from decades ago. It revealed that the land his home sat on wasn't supposed to be residential at all. In fact, it had once been a restricted site owned by the government, but the records abruptly ended there, sealed without explanation. The more he uncovered, the more dangerous it became. Strange cars began parking near his home late at night. His mail went missing. Margaret showed up at his door unannounced, her smile sharper than ever. "You're playing a dangerous game, Mr. Mercer," she warned. "Some truths aren't meant to be found." But Daniel was relentless. He discovered that beneath his house, there had once been an underground facility, long abandoned, forgotten by time. When he checked the basement, he noticed faint lines on the floor, almost like the outline of a sealed hatch. With a crowbar and determination, he pried it open. The stench of old earth and rust filled the room. A ladder descended into darkness. Re-hook. His heart pounded as he climbed down. What he found was chilling, a vast tunnel system lined with rusted metal doors and faded government insignias. Files scattered across the floor hinted at experiments, secret projects, and names of families who had once lived on this land. Families who had disappeared. And at the top of one file, Hensley. Everything snapped into place. Margaret wasn't protecting the neighborhood from Daniel's house. She was protecting her family's secret, that the HOA was nothing more than a front to control access to what lay beneath. His house stood directly over the entrance to something that was never supposed to be uncovered. When Daniel confronted her with the evidence, Margaret's composure finally cracked. Her voice trembled as she hissed, "You don't understand. If people find out what's buried here, it won't just destroy this neighborhood, it'll destroy everything." But Daniel couldn't be silenced now. He had the proof, the photos, the documents, and as he prepared to go public, Margaret gave him one last warning. "Some doors should never be opened. You've unleashed something you can't control." Re-hook. The story could have ended there, but it didn't. Days later, as Daniel was set to meet a journalist, his house suddenly caught fire. Neighbors claimed they saw it ignite from within, no one entering or leaving. Miraculously, Daniel escaped, clutching the files he had found. But the house, the supposed violation, was reduced to ashes. The HOA declared victory, calling it a tragic accident. Yet Daniel knew the truth. The house hadn't been against the rules. The truth itself was against the rules. And the people enforcing those rules would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried, even if it meant erasing families, rewriting history, and burning everything in their path. And as Daniel looked over the smoldering remains of his home, one thought burned in his mind. If they could silence the Garrisons, if they could silence him, how many more had already vanished without anyone remembering? The neighborhood seemed quiet again, almost too quiet. But behind every window, he felt eyes watching, waiting, judging. Because in Hensley Estates, the rules weren't about order or aesthetics. They were about power. And once you knew the truth, you became the biggest violation of all.